My fiancé sells me to his boss so he could get a promotion. I used to believe that love could weather anything, that no matter how many storms came our way, Daniel and I would always find a way through. 7 years together since college had taught me that. We met on campus during my sophomore year. I was late for an early morning chemistry lecture, my arms loaded with books, when I crashed right into him. Papers scattered everywhere, my notes flying across the damp pavement. While other students merely stepped around the mess, Daniel bent down to help. He had smiled at me, warm, reassuring, patient. It was the kind of smile that felt like home. For years, that was exactly what he had been, my home. We fought through financial hardships together, celebrating the small victories, making the best of what little we had. He supported me through medical school, just as I stood by him through his long, grueling climb up the corporate ladder. When I received my final residency placement, he was the first person I called. He had been so proud, lifting me off my feet and spinning me around our tiny apartment. "Dr. Olivia Carter," he had said, pressing a kiss to my forehead. "You're going to be incredible." It had always been us against the world. Until, suddenly, it wasn't. Lately, something had changed. At first, I brushed it off as stress. Daniel had always been ambitious, and I knew the promotion he was gunning for meant everything to him. Still, it was impossible not to notice the way he started snapping at me over the smallest things. The way his mind always seemed elsewhere. I would come home late from my shifts to find him already asleep or, worse, still out at work functions. He'd never used to care much for those, always complaining about office politics. Now, he went to every single one. Then, one evening, he mentioned an upcoming party at his firm. "Come with me this time," he said as we ate dinner. "Everyone's bringing their wives and girlfriends." I hesitated, pushing a piece of chicken around my plate. "I don't think I can. I have a double shift at the hospital." His jaw tensed. "Liv, you always have a shift." "That's my job, Daniel. You knew what this was going to be like when I started med school." "Yeah, but I didn't think you'd always put it above everything else." "Above me?" The accusation hit me like a slap. "That's not fair. I've always supported you. Then support me now." His voice dropped, frustration bleeding into his tone. "I need you to be there." Something about the way he said it sent a chill through me, but I ignored it. I ignored the warning in my gut, the unease curling in my stomach. Instead, I agreed. The night of the party, I felt like an outsider in my own life. The venue was a high-rise rooftop, glowing with golden lights and laughter that felt too hollow. The air smelled of expensive liquor and designer cologne. Daniel's hand was tight on my waist as he led me around, introducing me to colleagues I barely recognized. The entire time, I could feel someone watching me. When I turned, I met the calculating gaze of Daniel's boss, a man at least 20 years our senior. He looked at me like I was something to be owned, like I was expected. I shivered and turned back to Daniel. "I don't feel comfortable here." He frowned. "It's just in your head." "Daniel." "Liv, seriously, don't make a scene. You wanted to come." I hadn't, but I stayed anyway. After that night, Daniel started inviting me to every single event. I refused the next two, despite his irritation. The third, I simply couldn't get out of. It was the firm's annual celebration, held at an extravagant hotel. The moment we stepped inside, I felt suffocated. The chandeliers were too bright, the people too polished, their laughter too loud. My pulse quickened, unease gnawing at me. I scanned the room, instinctively marking the exits. Daniel handed me a drink. "Relax." I took it, but something about the way he watched me felt off. When I hesitated, he pressed a different glass into my hands instead. "This one's better," he said with a smile. "Trust me." The second sip was when I realized something was wrong. Heat surged through my body, making my skin burn. My vision blurred at the edges, my limbs turning sluggish. The chatter around me warped into an unintelligible hum. My heart pounded too fast, my breath coming too short. A hand brushed my waist, lips close to my ear. Daniel's voice. "Just go with the flow, Liv. It's for my promotion." For his promotion. Everything clicked into place in an instant. The distant behavior. The insistence that I attend these events. The looks from his boss. My fiancé had drugged me. Cold terror sliced through my haze. I forced my body to stay upright, blinking sluggishly at him. Bathroom, I mumbled. I need. He nodded, pleased. I turned, steadying myself as I moved through the crowd. Every step felt like walking through molasses. I smiled weakly at the waitstaff as I stumbled toward the kitchen, feigning clumsiness. The moment I crossed the threshold, I broke into a run. My breath sawed through my throat, my vision tunneling. I shoved through the back exit, out into the parking lot, desperate for fresh air. Then I saw them, 2 police officers near their squad car. I sprinted toward them, my body barely obeying. One officer turned, startled, as I yanked open the car door. I've been drugged. I gasped, my voice hoarse. I'm a doctor, help me. Then the world tilted sideways, and everything went black. The last thing I heard was someone shouting my name. Then nothing. The first thing I became aware of was the sterile scent of antiseptic. My body felt like it was made of lead, every limb too heavy to move. My eyelids fluttered open, revealing the 2 bright fluorescent lights of a hospital room. I wasn't alone. A cluster of familiar faces stood by my bed, my colleagues, my mentors. Dr. Patel, the attending physician I admired most, was there, her sharp gaze softened with concern. Olivia, she said, relief threading through her voice. You're awake. I swallowed, my throat raw. What happened? You tell us, another doctor said gently. The police are here. They need your statement. My heart pounded as the memories came rushing back. The party. The drink. Daniel's whispered words. Then, the betrayal. My hands curled into fists as I pushed myself upright. Where is he? I asked, my voice cold. Dr. Patel exchanged a glance, with the officer standing nearby. He's been arrested. Relief warred with fury inside me. I had spent 7 years of my life with him, believing in a love that, in the end, had been nothing but a lie. I forced my trembling hands to still as I turned to the officers. I'll tell you everything. It took nearly an hour to recount the events of that night. My voice wavered at times, but I refused to let the emotion consume me. By the time I finished, one of the officers, a grizzled man with kind eyes, gave a small nod. You're brave, Dr. Carter. Thanks to you, we might finally have enough to put these men away. A bitter laugh escaped me. I should have seen the signs sooner. The important thing is that you got out. That, at least, was true. But the battle was far from over. In the days that followed, news of the scandal broke. More victims came forward, women who had been too afraid, too ashamed to speak. Some of Daniel's colleagues denied everything, but others weren't so lucky. His boss was among them, his predatory nature exposed for the world to see. And Daniel? He tried to reach out. He sent letters, left messages, even had a mutual friend visit my hospital. But I wanted nothing to do with him. The man I had loved was gone. All that was left was the stranger who had betrayed me for a promotion. And I would never forgive him. The days after the scandal unraveled were a blur of police statements, hospital shifts, and sleepless nights. I should have felt relief knowing Daniel and his boss were behind bars, but all I felt was emptiness. 7 years of my life had gone up in flames, and I was left standing in the ruins, trying to remember who I had been before him. I wasn't just grieving a lost relationship. I was mourning the version of myself that had trusted too easily, that had believed love was unbreakable. The betrayal clung to my skin, suffocating me with every whispered rumor in the hospital halls, every side glance from people who thought they knew me. Some pitied me. Others doubted me. The worst were the ones who thought I had deserved it. That maybe, just maybe, I had known what was happening and played along. It made me sick. I buried myself in work, taking extra shifts until exhaustion numbed the ache in my chest. My patients didn't care about the scandal, the headlines, the court hearings. They only cared that I helped them heal, and for that I was grateful. But even the solace of work couldn't shield me from the truth that cut even deeper than Daniel's betrayal. Emily, my own cousin. The one who had first introduced me to Daniel, the one who had celebrated our anniversaries with us, who had stood beside me through all our hardships. She had known. The police investigation uncovered text messages, financial transactions, and connections between her and Daniel's boss. She had benefited from their illicit dealings, had turned a blind eye to what was happening to me. The night I confronted her, it was raining. Fitting, really. A storm breaking over the childhood home we had once played in, the place that had once been a haven. Now it was just another backdrop for betrayal. Emily stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Regret or resentment, I didn't know. "You knew," I whispered, my voice shaking. "You knew what he was doing. And you said nothing." She exhaled sharply. "I didn't think it was that bad, Liv. I thought you were happy with him." Happy. A hollow laugh escaped me, sharp and jagged. "I was nearly trafficked, Emily. He drugged me. He sold me out, and you're telling me you didn't think it was that bad?" Her face twisted, but she didn't deny it. "I needed the money. I was drowning in debt. So, you let them use me?" I screamed, my chest heaving. "You stood by and let him." My voice broke, and suddenly, I couldn't breathe. The betrayal was a noose tightening around my throat. "You were my family, Emily. How could you?" For a moment, I thought she might break down, that she might fall to her knees and beg for forgiveness. But instead, she just looked at me with tired eyes. "You wouldn't understand." And just like that, I knew we were done. I turned away, ignoring her calls, ignoring the rain soaking through my clothes. There was nothing left to say. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't let them win. Not Daniel, not his boss, not Emily. They had stolen so much from me, but they wouldn't take my future. I started attending court hearings, standing at the back of the courtroom as Daniel was let in, shackled and small. He looked nothing like the man I had once loved. He was pathetic now, a ghost of his former self. He never met my eyes. His lawyer reached out, begging me to testify in a way that might grant him leniency. I laughed in his face. Instead, I took the stand and laid everything bare. The courtroom fell into an eerie silence as I recounted every detail, the way the room had spun after I drank from that glass, the way Daniel had whispered for me to go along with it, the way I had run for my life, my heart pounding in terror. By the time the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, I felt something deep inside me shift. Justice hadn't erased the pain, but it had given me something else. Closure. With the trial behind me, I focused on rebuilding. I moved into a new apartment, smaller but warm, filled with light. I cut ties with those who had betrayed me, surrounding myself only with those who truly cared. I started therapy. I learned to trust myself again, to believe in my own strength. And when an opportunity arose to lead a new medical initiative, one focused on helping survivors of assault and trafficking, I took it without hesitation. Because I wasn't just a victim. I was a survivor. And it was time to start living again. The trial was over, but the echoes of it followed me everywhere. Justice had been served, yet I felt like I was still living in the wreckage Daniel had left behind. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, his cold, detached expression in court, his hands shackled, his gaze avoiding mine. Freedom should have felt like a victory. But instead, I felt untethered, like I had been wandering a battlefield after the war had ended, unsure of where to go next. I tried throwing myself into work again, but even the solace I had once found in medicine felt different now. My hands were steady as I treated my patients, but my mind wasn't. I had spent years believing in my ability to heal others, yet I couldn't seem to heal myself. Therapy was supposed to help, and to an extent it did. But it also forced me to face parts of myself I had been trying to ignore. "Olivia, you don't have to carry the guilt of what happened," Dr. Patel told me one afternoon, her voice calm but firm. I clenched my hands together in my lap. I should have seen the signs. I was with him for 7 years. How did I not know? She tilted her head, studying me. "Because you trusted him. That's not a flaw, Olivia. That's what love is supposed to be." Love. The word tasted foreign now. Once, I had believed in it so fiercely. I had imagined a future with Daniel, a life together built on the struggles we had endured. And now I was left wondering if any of it had ever been real. I didn't know how to let go of that. A month after the trial, an unexpected invitation arrived. It was from Dr. Benson, one of the senior physicians at the hospital. "There's an upcoming medical conference," she told me in passing during a shift. "They're looking for speakers, and I thought of you." I blinked in surprise. "Me?" She smiled. "You've been through something unimaginable, Olivia. And you're still here, still fighting. That means something." I wanted to refuse. The idea of standing in front of an audience, of laying my experiences bare to a room full of strangers, felt unbearable. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something important. My voice mattered. If telling my story could help someone, just one person, then maybe it was worth it. The conference was held in a grand hotel downtown, the kind with chandeliers so bright they hurt your eyes and ceilings so high they seemed to stretch into the clouds. My hands trembled as I stood backstage, gripping my speech, my pulse hammering in my ears. I could still back out. I could walk away and never look back. But then I thought of all the women who never got the chance to run, who never got justice, who were still suffering in silence. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The room was full, but I only saw the bright lights and the microphone in front of me. I cleared my throat and started to speak. "My name is Olivia Carter," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "I am a doctor. I am a survivor." And for the longest time, I didn't know if I would ever say those words out loud. I told them everything. The love, the betrayal, the moment I realized the man I had planned to marry had sold me out. The way I had fought to escape. The way I had run. The way I had stood in a courtroom and faced him, refusing to let him win. And then I told them something else. "I am not just here because I survived," I said, my voice rising. "I am here because I refuse to let my story end with pain. I refuse to be defined by what he did to me. And if there is anyone out there who feels trapped, who feels like there is no way out, please listen to me when I say, you're stronger than you think." When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. And then, applause erupted, loud and fierce. Tears blurred my vision, but for the first time in a long time, I let them fall. After the conference, something changed in me. I no longer felt like I was just surviving. I was living. I reached out to organizations dedicated to helping survivors of trafficking and abuse. I volunteered, I spoke, I helped however I could. And in doing so, I found pieces of myself I had thought were lost forever. One evening, as I was walking home from the hospital, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello." A soft voice came through the line. "Dr. Carter?" "Yes," I said cautiously. "My name is Sophia," she whispered. I was at the conference. I think I need help." My breath caught in my throat. This was why I had survived. And I wasn't going to let her down. Sophia's call changed everything. I had spent weeks telling myself that my story mattered, that speaking out could make a difference. But hearing her voice, so fragile, so afraid, turned those words into something real. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the people still trapped in nightmares like mine, people who didn't know how to escape. I met Sophia at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. She was barely more than a girl, no older than 22, her hands shaking as she stirred her untouched coffee. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning for danger. I knew that feeling all too well. "I don't know what to do," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I trusted him. He said he loved me." My heart twisted painfully. The story was familiar. Too familiar. I reached across the table, offering her a reassuring hand. "You don't have to go through this alone. There are people who can help." She swallowed hard. "But what if it's too late?" I shook my head. "It's never too late to take back your life." We talked for hours. I listened as she poured out everything, how she had been manipulated, how the man she loved had slowly isolated her, how she had only recently realized the danger she was in. By the time we left the cafe, she had agreed to go to a shelter that specialized in helping survivors like her. It wasn't a perfect solution. The road ahead for her would be long and painful, but it was a start. And sometimes that was all you needed. Helping Sophia reminded me why I had fought so hard to survive. If I could save even one person from the horrors I had faced, then everything I had endured meant something. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something else. I wasn't just healing. I was becoming someone new, someone stronger, someone braver. And I wasn't going to stop. Months passed. Each day, I felt a little lighter, a little freer. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they no longer controlled me. Therapy helped. So did my work. And so did the people I was fighting for. After helping Sophia, I threw myself into advocacy. I partnered with organizations, spoke at more conferences, and even started working on a program within the hospital to provide specialized care for survivors of abuse and trafficking. One afternoon, I received an email from a law firm that had been handling cases similar to mine. They were building a larger case against Daniel's former boss, one that could expose the full extent of his crimes and the network he was a part of. Would I be willing to testify? I stared at the email for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I had already faced Daniel in court, already told my story once. Did I have the strength to do it again? Then I thought of Sophia, and all the others like her. I clicked reply and typed one word: yes.
The courtroom felt different this time.
I wasn't the scared, broken woman I had been before. I stood tall, my voice unwavering as I recounted everything I knew. The defense tried to twist my words, to poke holes in my story. But I didn't waver. By the end of the trial, the verdict was clear: guilty on all counts. This time, I did feel victorious. After the trial, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunlight, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a warrior. And my story wasn't over, it was only just beginning. Sophia's call changed everything. I'd spent weeks telling myself that my story mattered, that speaking out could make a difference. But hearing her voice, so fragile, so afraid, turned those words into something real. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the people still trapped in nightmares like mine, people who didn't know how to escape. I met Sophia at a small cafe on the outskirts of town. She was barely more than a girl, no older than 22, her hands shaking as she stirred her untouched coffee. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning for danger. I knew that feeling all too well. "I don't know what to do," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I trusted him. He said he loved me." My heart twisted painfully. The story was familiar. Too familiar. I reached across the table, offering her a reassuring hand. "You don't have to go through this alone. There are people who can help." She swallowed hard. "But what if it's too late?" I shook my head. "It's never too late to take back your life." We talked for hours. I listened as she poured out everything: how she had been manipulated, how the man she loved had slowly isolated her, how she had only recently realized the danger she was in. By the time we left the cafe, she had agreed to go to a shelter that specialized in helping survivors like her. It wasn't a perfect solution. The road ahead for her would be long and painful, but it was a start. And sometimes that was all you needed. But not all stories had such an ending. Days later, I visited a support group for survivors. The moment I stepped inside the dimly lit room, a wave of emotions hit me like a freight train. Women sat in a circle, their gazes hollow, their voices tinged with pain. Some had escaped like I had, but others had scars, both visible and hidden, that would never fade. "I lost my daughter," a woman named Maria said, her voice cracking. "I thought he'd only hurt me, but he took her away." A lump formed in my throat. I wanted to comfort her, to promise her justice. But what words could possibly mend a wound so deep? I listened to more stories, some of escape, some of loss, some of those still too afraid to hope. The guilt crept in like a thief in the night. I had survived, but so many hadn't. Was it selfish to move forward when others were still trapped in their pasts? That night, my nightmares returned with a vengeance. I was back in the hotel, trapped in that suffocating room. Hands clawed at me, voices whispered in my ear, promising pain, powerlessness. My body felt heavy, unable to move, drowning in a sea of faceless men with sinister grins. Then, suddenly, Daniel was there, watching from the corner, his face unreadable. When I turned to run, my feet wouldn't move. The walls collapsed inward, trapping me in a suffocating void. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The past wasn't done with me yet. Months passed. Each day, I felt a little lighter, a little freer. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they no longer controlled me. Therapy helped. So did my work. And so did the people I was fighting for. After helping Sophia, I threw myself into advocacy. I partnered with organizations, spoke at more conferences, and even started working on a program within the hospital to provide specialized care for survivors of abuse and trafficking. But it wasn't easy. The moment my name became associated with the case, whispers followed. Some people called me brave. Others called me a liar. I saw the way some of my colleagues looked at me. Pity, discomfort, doubt. You're making a mistake. One of my former mentors warned me. You're a doctor. If you become the face of this, you'll always be seen as a victim first. The word stung. I had worked my entire life to be seen as more than my trauma. But how could I turn my back on something so important? One afternoon, I received an email from a law firm that had been handling cases similar to mine. They were building a larger case against Daniel's former boss, one that could expose the full extent of his crimes and the network he was a part of. Would I be willing to testify? I stared at the email for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I had already faced Daniel in court, already told my story once. Did I have the strength to do it again? Would I be defined by this forever? Then I thought of Sophia, and all the others like her. I clicked reply and typed one word. Yes. The day of the trial, fear coiled around my chest, squeezing with every step I took toward the courthouse. My hands trembled, the ghosts of my past whispering that I was walking into another battlefield, another place where I would be judged. But then I saw them. Daniel and his boss, once untouchable, powerful men, now sat in cuffs, their suits wrinkled, their eyes hollow. Their power had been stripped away, replaced with fear. For the first time, I saw them for what they truly were, cowards who had hidden behind money and influence, preying on the powerless. And suddenly, my fear lessened. Court reporters filled the room, but their focus wasn't on the victims. They weren't smearing us, weren't casting doubt on our stories. Instead, they wrote about the monstrous crimes, the shocking betrayal of trust. The news had shaken the city to its core. These weren't just criminals. They were respected men in society, men whose families, neighbors, and friends never suspected a thing. The betrayal rippled through the community, leaving outrage in its wake. My testimony was steady. I recounted the night at the hotel, the moment I realized Daniel had betrayed me. The defense tried to poke holes in my words, but I had nothing to hide. I spoke not just for myself, but for every victim who never got the chance to be heard. And when the prosecution presented the evidence, the testimonies of other survivors, the hidden ledgers detailing transactions too sinister to ignore, there was no room for doubt. Outside, the public was furious. People who once knew Daniel and his boss looked at them with disgust. Friends of their families refused to show support. Neighbors shunned them. The hospital where Daniel's boss had been a respected figure erased his name from every record, distancing themselves from the filth he represented. Justice wasn't just happening inside the courtroom. It was happening out there, in the real world, where their reputations were crumbling like the lies they had built them on. By the end of the trial, the verdict was clear: guilty on all counts. But victory didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a door finally closing, allowing another one to open. After the trial, I walked out of the courthouse into the bright sunlight, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a warrior. And my story wasn't over. It was only just beginning.